Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today on the Dairy Signal, we have a really fun and unique episode coming at you here this afternoon as we are highlighting yet again one of our Nexus presenters here on the Dairy Signal. And if you were able to join us at our annual business conference back in March, you might have heard their name as they went across the general session stage, or maybe saw them on the Nexus stage at the business conference where they were showcasing their new innovation. But maybe you're probably tuning in here today because you didn't have a chance to listen during that time, as there's always so much going on during business conference, or maybe you're interested in learning more about this unique innovation and how it could potentially help your farm. And in doing so, you're probably wondering, gosh, well, Nexus on the Dairy Signal is a little unique. How did they come about? Why this business? And so a little background here before we begin is that Nexus begins with an application process, and companies are able to submit an application, written and video, about the unique innovation technology or service that they can provide to dairy producers that fixes a problem that they have in the industry. And ultimately, a group of producers come together, a committee does, and they go through these applications and they decide the top five. And then those top five head to business conference where they're able to showcase their innovation. And ultimately, that leads us here to today, where we have one of those companies presenting this afternoon to talk about their unique solution to a common problem within the dairy sector. And joining us this afternoon to go through that is Ben Jones, who's a co-CEO of Dairy Nutrient Reclamation. And we've got a really fun presentation coming at you here this afternoon that you can ask your questions on as well. But Ben, thank you for joining us here today. And I know I've only got a really small tidbit of a title here for you, but any other information about yourself you would like to share with our audience here today?
Overall, my brother and I, we run Dairy Nutrient Reclamation, kind of more of an innovative approach to how you look at storing your feed on a large scale dairy. We milk around 2,000 cows currently. We're in the process of going to 5,000 cows. So it's applicable to many scopes of dairy, large and small. We have 12 years of, more than 12 years of experience firsthand of the issues and concerns of dairymen traditionally face. And that's kind of what has led to the development of essential water solutions, or kind of next generation feed pad storage. How I kind of I'm a results oriented individual, if you will. And that's kind of how Mike and I, my brother, we focus on things, what ultimately leads to the results that we're trying to obtain. That's kind of how this came about. So as we walk through this, I look forward to people's questions.
Well, we're excited to dive into this, Ben, and I think you set me up perfectly here to remind people that if they're watching live, you can ask your questions via Slido, and that is to the right of your screen on a desktop device. And if you're on a mobile device, you can scroll on down below and type your questions in there. And we'll be taking them periodically throughout today's discussion as well as the end. So make sure to get your questions in for Ben. But with all of that being said, without further ado, Ben, I'm going to pass it back to you to get us started.
Wonderful. So I would assume, Jack, if I am correct, can people see my screen right now?
Yes. Yep. Your screen is up, Ben.
Yep. So this is all right. This is our innovative approach. If you're looking at a new feed pad system, we do have a retrofit that also allows you to accomplish the exact same thing on your existing infrastructure. So we have the mindset of let's utilize what we currently have. But if we are taking a green site approach or we're building a new pad, there's a more optimal design that's allowed. So to start out here on my screen, you can see we have a low point. We like to call it the rolling feed pad. Now, when people think rolling, they think, well, nobody wants to have a rolly feed pad, but this is using only subtle gradients to concentrate your flow patterns. You can think about it like a Walmart parking lot. How do they delegate flow of rainwater or discharge across the parking lot without flooding out while customers are walking across? Similar ideology. So as yellow indicates is the lower point, red is the higher point, and the blue arrows actually designate the water flow. So we have chosen 75-foot high point to high point. So as we clear a high point, we actually can switch out a manhole. So all this water flow is going to a manhole as designated here at the bottom of all of the water flows. So these manholes are acting as a primary delegation on whether you're going to be collecting leachate or you're going to be discharging your clean water. So there's two systems in one here that are actively working together. One, as you can see on the right here, these piles, 100% of the rainwater is discharging right into this center channel between the two leachate channels. It's running down to the end into a manhole and going into the top of the screen, which is we call it the retention pond. It doesn't actually retain anything. We're only required to slow the flow because there's such a large volume of water leaving at once. If you look at this haylage pile here, all this leachate is running down to the low point in front of it. It's hitting a manhole cover. Because we're still collecting from this high point to the face, this is a solid manhole cover, which allows the leachate to run over the manhole cover into the leachate channel, and that is then collected and put into a 10,000 gallon Weezer tank, which pumps to the lagoon. So that's all we require is a 10,000 gallon tank. So this red line here, designated by the mouse, that's a little bit higher gradient than this yellow line. So this part of the feed pad is completely discharging the clean water when it rains it right down the ditch. Permit free, no issue, because it never comes in contact with the feed. It's no longer considered processed wastewater. So the max amount of water we're ever collecting is 75 feet within the face. And as soon as we get over, this pile's actually just about to get over the next high point, we can then switch out this manhole cover to a perforated, and then that will then discharge the clean water right across into the channel and then start going down the ditch. So if anybody's wondering what the manholes I'm talking about, this kind of designates what I'm talking about. The center picture is a solid manhole cover. So as the leachate, as you can imagine, runs to this point, this is actually a sealed manhole. The leachate runs across and runs into this channel. That allows total collection. There's no way for leachate to make it to the ditch. Now, if you look at the left-hand side, as we come across the manhole, once we get over the high point, this manhole, the only requirement of feeders or anybody on the farm is every 75 feet of feed, you just switch this manhole out. It takes you less than 5 minutes. Now all your clean water is now discharged off your feed pad and goes right down the ditch. Now, as you can imagine, the mirror image of where this open perforated manhole is, there's one exactly opposite underneath the pile next to that perforated. So you can see the plastic comes down, it runs over the manhole, it runs over the leachate channel, so all your water can run off of your plastic into the center channel, which then can be discharged down the ditch as well, because there's no contamination. Now I put the picture here on the right as an example. A lot of people like to say, well, is the channel along the edge truly necessary? And this is my argument as to why. You can get some leachate, and there's a little hump here, as you can see designated by my mouse. That is why. From a DNR standpoint, having the channel along the entire edge guarantees collection. It's a fail-safe built in where you get a free employee. Gravity is never going to fail. If it does, we all have a lot bigger problems. So right here, you can see, even though the leachate is coming along, it's not flowing towards the manhole because there's actually a high point here. It just starts running over the edge and gets collected at the edge. Now, from this novel approach, we do have a designated retrofit. So the retrofit, as you can see, there's two shades of concrete on the screen. From right at point B over to point A, that was our initial feed pad or corn silage pad. In our scenario, we required more storage, so we added another 140 feet here on the left side. Now, in doing so, to the left of from point B to point C, this is the rolling feed pad along here. But we had the similar problem, or what we called it. This initial feed pad was a mono-slope feed pad designated up in the center of the screen. So all of our discharge was there, and we had to figure out how do we get the same type of diversion working as the novel approach. And how we did it is we cut 2.5 feet of concrete out every 75 feet. We utilized the existing gradient, and then we just put a small 2.5 inch diversion bump or speed bump, we like to call it. And the water, the exact same thing. Once you get over this high point, now you can discharge this entire section of feed pad. It all runs across to the same patented design, the manhole on the edge, which allows you to delegate between your leachate collection and your clean water. So as you can see from a maintenance for your forage application on as you're making your food or your feed, the only thing we do is we actually lay down some very thin 16 of an inch sheeting of steel. So that way, if a little bit of feed gets caught on your blade or something, it doesn't fill in your channel. So then we just slide those panels down as we make. So you only ever have about 100 feet at a time or 150 feet actually covered the channel. Once you lay your plastic down, then there's no new variants that farms have to worry about. All you have to do is lay down your plastic. You run the plastic over your leachate channel. You're going to discharge 100% of that water off your plastic right down the ditch, no questions asked. As you can see on the right side of the photo, we are discharging all the water off of that plastic. No issues, absolutely nothing.
So, Ben, we had a question come in, and you kind of already talked about this a little bit, but if you could maybe talk a little bit more in depth about how, having these fail safes on the side with the leachate channels and gravity and how this all works, because the question is, how does this work for DNR and environmental regulations? And I think that's a valid concern.
Yep. So DNR and environmental regulations, it accomplishes everything that the DNR wants. You are collecting 100% of the leachate. You are no longer putting the exorbitant amount of water into your lagoons because you're able to delegate how much is going to your lagoons because the max amount of collection is only 75 feet within the face. So environmentally speaking, it's astronomical, the environmental impact, because now you can figure roughly if you're every 10 million gallons of rainwater, or roughly 10 million gallons of rainwater going into your lagoon is about 500 cows. So if you back figure that, all that water is being hauled out to the fields. So all we're doing is we're lowering the dry matter content within our lagoons, which is increasing the volume that we have to haul out to the fields, which means there's that much more of a turbulent tillage management program, part of the nutrient management plan in the fall or spring, because you have to till thousands of more acres for what's being put out. Now, in addition, you have a true impact on your community as well, because now there's a legitimate discussion on road infrastructure breakdown. If you have to run and utilize semis, you can imagine from if you are dealing with carbon credits, you're running thousands and thousands of semis down the road that you really don't have to. So this design pays for itself in less than a year's time. So from a farming standpoint and from a DNR standpoint, I've actually been told from members of the DNR, this is the best design on the market because it accomplishes everything they want. But the problem is DNR cannot stand behind a design. They cannot come to a farm and say, hey, this is the design we want you to put in. Otherwise, they would be standing behind a company and promoting something. So I understand those safeguards that they have. But from a strict farming standpoint, you save hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's less than a year payback. And my biggest thing is you accomplish everything as agriculturalist that you want to accomplish, you get to accomplish while saving money. You couldn't ask for a better product. And I don't just say that off the cuff. I say that from experience. I say that from experiencing year after year. I smile every time there's a big rain because I just drive over by the retention pond and I can literally see the millions and millions of gallons of water that is just going right down the ditch. No questions asked. So
Ben, I have to say, I appreciate not only knowing and hearing that, from a DNR and environmental standpoint, it checks all the boxes that it's supposed to, but it's got a lot of other benefits as well. So I'm going to let you keep going on with what your next portion is here, especially as we go through. I know there's going to be a lot more questions, a lot more to talk about.
So our big thing is this design, whether it be the retrofit or the novel design, everything is customizable to what the farm wants. And a lot of people look at this design and say, oh, well, he's 75 feet. That was all based off of a calculation of our preference. So the preference can be defined by the individual that wants to put it in and how they want to do their scenario. So what I mean by preference, so for example, we chose 75 feet because we found that to be optimal for our scenario. But there's no reason that you can't do 50 feet, 60 feet. You guys get to calculate what's your max amount of or max volume of water that you will collect before you're able to change to the diversion or change the manhole. So that's completely customizable. In addition, this clean water channel that's on the other side of your leachate channel, that can be customizable. So for an example, our commodity shed is on the upper portion of this screen. So we actually drive around, but now that's a shorter distance. If you have a larger distance to travel, we have 11 feet between the two leachate channels between piles. We did it for efficiency of space. I don't need to drive between those piles. So we chose 11 feet. It was wide enough where we can drive a payloader through if we need to lay tires down on the pile, but it's not wide, super wide where we're wasting space. So you can adjust the width of that channel. Everything, it allows the farmer to essentially, bottom line, choose what they want. I'm not going to shove something down somebody's throat and say, you have to do it this way. As a farmer, that's not how I roll. I can't speak for others, but I don't know many guys in agriculture that like being told you have to do this, period, bottom line. But unfortunately, I don't have the video today, but I'm willing to show anybody that's interested this, and I can share videos later on. But these diversion bumps, I do have a video that it unfortunately would not download today, but it shows semis driving over these diversion bumps. You can imagine they're roughly 2.5 feet wide, and they're only 2.5 inches tall. The semis, the tractors have zero problem driving over any of them. And I will mention everything on this feed pad, semis can drive over 100% of it with no issue. That was one thing we really focused on. We didn't want to change how we make the feed. We don't want to have forage companies, everybody having to work around something. Essentially, we're setting our parameters. So no different than when you're planning a rotary carousel. You plan out, this is your footprint, this is the amount of cows we're going to be milking, this is what we're shooting for per hour. A feed pad should be no different. You know how many inches you want to feed off your face per day. So it's the exact same thing. Based on what you want your dairy site to accomplish, and you can develop that into a vision of what you want over the next couple of years, or if you're going to stay stagnant at the size you are, you know how many inches, you know how much tonnage you're going to put up. So it's just a matter of calculation of how wide you want that to be. So yes, your piles have to be made the same every year, but that's no problem because you can feed off of both sides of this pad because your high diversion points are, in our case, north to south. So it doesn't restrict you. You can constantly put new feed on either side. I think I have one other slide here. So this is a good example, a little bit of a zoomed in version of these of the leachate channels and the clean water. So as you can see on the right side of the screen, the water comes down off this corn silage pile and it runs over the leachate channel, and this just goes right to the ditch. There's no restriction at all. We're only slowing the flow. So because we were actually eroding the ditch so much, the county actually came out and they put rock in the ditch because there's so much water going to the bottom of the hill. So same thing here. Once these channels, once the feed is made, we pull those metal slots right off of there. And then the plastic just sits on this leachate channel. And we actually allow, the main reason we do that, when it rains, the plastic actually assists in your diversion. So the water will push this plastic a little bit down into these slotted grates, which only acts even more as a diversion, assisting to make sure the leachate lands in that channel. But as I mentioned earlier, there is no greater employee than gravity. So why pay employees to be doing something? Why, or a forage company, if you were having your feed processed or trying to put down sandbags or tile lines, there's no need to do those things when we can just let gravity do what gravity does best. So, um,
So Ben, do you got any more slides? Otherwise, we've got some more questions we can go through here.
I do not have any more slides right now.
Okay, that sounds good. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier is that it's about a year for the return on investment. How did you come about that? How was that calculated? Given the variety of different scenarios that could be for a different farm, size, shape, everything in between.
So the nice part about a feed pad is everything can be back figured because we all know what our average rainfall is per year. So we're basing our numbers off of annual rainfall per area. So, or demographic area rather. So for our example, we actually have a calculator that allows you to plug in your parameters prior to doing anything. And you can see your estimated cost savings right out of the bat just on your manure hauling. So the cost savings is not on the feed pad, the cost savings is all in your manure hauling. So when you plug in your average rainfall, your square foot, your average moisture that you make your feed at, roughly you usually have around 3.74 gallons of leachate per ton of feed, roughly. So in doing those calculations, you have all the data. So it's just a matter of back figuring, and that all kind of accumulates into, what you're already doing. So that's how we kind of came up with, we're roughly a 10-month payback, just based on annual rainfall on that not going into your lagoon. Now, that's not to say as your feed pad becomes bigger, and you can utilize more altitude, those numbers can vary, but I'm speaking in a very generic sense when I say 10 months. But either way, I know from agriculture, even if I could tell you a year and a half, it's a phenomenal payback. And once it's implemented, it's year over year guaranteed savings. That's hard to beat. There's not many companies or many products that can guarantee that.
Well, and exactly as you're saying, that timeline, nobody's going to be mad over. There's not many things you can get in life that have that kind of return timeline. But going on to that lagoon side of things and talking about, being able to save space in the lagoon, what does that really mean for a farm? Does that really open up the availability to have more cows on site without having to change lagoon sizes? How does that work?
So our rough figure, I actually misspoke earlier when I was speaking. I said 10 million gallons for every 500 cows. It's actually a simpler conversion. It's actually 5 million gallons for 500 cows. So every 5 million gallons, or for simplistic, every million gallons of rainwater we kick down the ditch, we can add 100 cows in existing manure infrastructure if you're collecting all your water currently. So those numbers, so when I'm saying there's substantial savings just in manure hauling, that's just the initial savings out of the gate. Then as the farm is ready, you already have the manure infrastructure in place. As the water's no longer going there, so now every million gallons we're putting down the ditch, you get to add 100 cows. So as a farmer myself, I'd rather focus on building barns that can house more animals than I gotta go dig another hole, put more concrete there. It's the slowest ROI on a farm because you got to do it first. So you got to eat that cost on the front side, and there's no way around it. Well, now, why not utilize what we have to a more great potential? And that's where we kind of took the approach with this feed pad. It's never made sense on the volume of water that we're putting on our lagoons. We're just inducing runoff long-term wise. We're diluting down our fertilizer. So that's kind of the advantages are so far beyond just the feed pad savings and the manure hauling, because there's very real profit from milk. And I believe I said during my presentation down at Nexus, I'd rather see I'd rather see milk tankers going down the road as opposed to manure tankers.
And I think that's a very fair sentiment for many who are listening and watching, because there is a much better feeling when you know that that tanker of milk is going to be coming back with a paycheck rather than being spread onto fields and doing what it does there in some way, shape, or form. But we've had a question that came in, and I think it's another good one to go through, because the question reads, you mentioned it's customizable, but is there a minimum or maximum size we have to be aware of?
That's the beauty of it. There is not a minimum or maximum. If you are required to collect your rainwater, this design will work for you because you can always add on. You can always add on to it. Uh, Everything's set up, so you just keep adding on lengthwise. If you need more haylage, you add on. Need more corn silage, add on. Um, so I think that every size there will be savings. Now, if you're 200 cows, I don't believe this design would be in your best interest because you're not required to collect the water. So if you're not required to collect the water, I don't think it would be of value to put in a design like this. Although it's better for the environment, there's no doubt. It just That's just the farmer and me speaking, I guess. So there is, if you hit that CAFO limit and you all of a sudden have to start sending this water to your lagoon, yes, I can guarantee you this will pay for itself.
Okay. And I know as a farmer myself, coming from that farmer mentality has a big impact when talking about things like this, because you're going to be honest about, does this make sense? Or at least it sounds like you're going to be honest about, does this make sense? But you mentioned it from the environmental impact side, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about it, especially given that it's such a buzzword nowadays when it comes to sustainability. Does this have potential for carbon credits and or offsetting within carbon, or is that something that's yet to be discovered with this product?
I would disclose that under something that's currently being explored. So there's high potential for it to be within the carbon credit space. Do I have a firm foundation to say yes, that's a guarantee? I do not. That's something I'm exploring with many different companies at this point right now. But just logically thinking through it, I like to call this design the pre-digester. And the reason I say that, a digester is able to profit off of carbon credits on the backside of a farm by collecting gas. But what we're doing is we're eliminating gas production before it ever even gets to the lagoon. And it's not that we're eliminating necessarily gas production of what's in the lagoon, it's the carbon that's being um, put out into the environment from the semis running down the road, the infrastructure breakdown of the roads. But the heaviest carbon impact is the amount of soil that's having to be tilled and turning over, because the greatest carbon sequestration in the environment is growing and soil. Soil absorbs a tremendous amount of carbon out of the air. So every time we turn that over, that has a significant impact on sustainability. So if we can limit and litigate the amount of acreage that we're turning over every fall and every spring, I I I truly believe there is something there. I have yet to I don't have the ability to say that without having finished my discussions with current companies.
That's fair enough. And it sounds like it's something that we can definitely keep an eye on and see where it comes and goes here. One of the other side of things that, thinking as a producer, most feed pads, you really don't have a whole heck of a lot of maintenance. This sounds like there might be a little bit. What would that entail, if any?
So maintenance wise is, and most people don't believe me when I say this, so I came back to this slide. These purple channels that designate the leachate channels, I've never had to clean out in just over 5 years of use. I've never touched them. And the reason being, it almost acts like a self-cleaning flush flume in a barn. The reason I say that, and this was part of our calculation and why these high points are 75 feet apart. So if the little bit of biomass that blows across the feed pad on a windy day lands down in this channel, and you can see a little bit of buildup on the edge of this pile, that yes, remnants do flow down there, but you got to remember, you're collecting 75 feet in front of this face. So eventually, water you're still collecting has to run down that channel. So it's actually almost self-cleaning. And I truly believe that's why I have never had to touch them. Maintenance, true maintenance from a feeder standpoint, once you reach a high point and the wind kind of does it for us, you just clean off from high point to the clean side of pad. And you just make sure you're not dumping large volumes of feed or any remnants as you're hauling into your commodity shed or you're feeding. Other than that, every 75 feet in the pile, you just flip a manhole. So I can honestly say a week, I think our employee or our feeder that hauls in, I think he maybe spends 15 minutes a week. And that 15 minutes is if it's a real windy day and he's facing next to this edge, it blows over. And how we kind of litigated that was he just doesn't face because it's such a shallow edge along the channel. He just doesn't face 10 feet from the channel. He just cleaves that off with a bucket. So that's kind of how we accomplish it. But even 15 minutes a day, if your facer becomes proficient, how I view it, it's like a parlor. I expect my guys to know how to clean the parlor, and they're going to do things so it stays cleaner so they don't have to clean as much. So it's self-encouraging for the feeder to do it right, then he has less remnants to clean up later. So our guy's gotten phenomenal. I would say 15 minutes a week is even a drastically high comparison. I wouldn't, I'd probably say 5 minutes a day
So
now.
it's very minimal from what you're saying, and it's one of
Yes.
those where you do what you need to up front, and it really helps on the back end and saves
Yep.
time overall. So that's encouraging to hear that it's not a put it in and spend hours on trying to figure out and make sure it's working correctly type of system here. But thinking from a producer standpoint, and after today's discussion here, we're looking at, gosh, this sounds really good. It has a lot of opportunity for many in a variety of different farms here, but how do you get started? What do you do next? If you're somebody who's watching and thinking this sounds great, but what now?
Oh, see, so I'm a visual guy. If somebody tells me something's too good to be true, I want to lay eyes on it. I want to see it for myself because some people tend to be facetious at times. I open this up to anybody that's willing to do a tour. I stand behind it so much. I have nothing to hide. You can come out any day. A lot of farms that tend to come out to see it, they actually come out when it's raining. So most guys get days off when it rains. We actually just do tours in the rain now. But it allows you to actively see the gradients and how it's working. And it really gives you a really good understanding of how it works, just laying eyes. Because a lot of guys think the same thing as many guys that have talked about it. They're like, oh, well, a rolling feed pad, I don't like that idea. But then they come out, and I'm not kidding, every single one of them, well, this is nothing. You can barely even tell the gradients are there. I'm like, exactly. Everything's working how it should. But if you don't want to just tour and you just want to talk to somebody, I'm of course available. I'd be willing to talk about it. In addition, MSA down in Madison, they are taking care of the engineering of it right now. That doesn't mean that you can't utilize your engineering firm. We're not going to force you to use somebody you don't want to use, but any engineering company can do it. They just have to sign a licensing agreement. But then also, our feed pad was done by Spiegelberg Implement. Uh, you just require a 3D screed to pour it to make sure your gradients are appropriate. But otherwise, I personally, I just take the tour. I travel all over trying to see things and concepts, and while I trust people in agriculture, to be honest, it's just always easier to put eyes on it.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I'm also a visual person, so being able to see how things work and actually be able to put it together for my own eyes makes a big difference. And I know a lot of people out there feel the same. So appreciate you having the ability to offer that to those who are listening and might be considering this as an option for their farm. But as we kind of begin to wrap up here today, Ben, as we think about today's discussion, we've had a lot of really good and interesting conversation around the not only the return on investment, how it works, maintenance, and everything in between, but leaving today's discussion, what are one or two things that you want producers to be thinking about or actively doing?
Well, one thing I want farmers to be actively doing, everybody says they like to think about where expenses are on a farm. I encourage people to go against the status quo. And the reason I say that, most people like a feed pad, everybody's doing a monoslope to one corner and they've done it for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden you have somebody breathing down your neck saying, we got to collect this, got to collect this. Think outside the box, go against the grain. Don't listen to everybody else. I truly mean that. I don't care if it's rotary parlors. I don't care if it's feed pads. Look at things, and when you think them through, I truly believe there's a lot that everybody in agriculture has to learn, and over the years to come, I think we're going to start to develop and learn from things that we've been doing as the status quo, and I think they're going to change. Uh, and secondly, I'll leave you with this design is applicable beyond just the savings. And the reason I say this, if you already were forced to put in a leachate collection pond or a concrete lagoon next to your feed pad, doesn't mean this design wouldn't work for you. And the reason I say that, if you're able to delegate leachate from clean water, you now have a clean water source that you can draw off of. Now you can't put leachate or a combination of leachate and water into your sand separator. But like, for example, if we have a stern home, if you had a stern home, for example, you would be able to put your leachate into collection, but now utilize the water from your feed pad in your stern home or your sand separator that would allow you to have a clean source water that isn't coming from a well. So now it's getting back to that sustainability standpoint, we're able to recycle the water on the farm as opposed to just constantly using fresh, clean water. So this really emphasized on that sustainability and how this plays a key role within agriculture
Well,
beyond
I
just
think
saving money.
Well, I think that this is a great way to look at things. It's not only opening your mind up to what else is out there, seeing what else might be a good fit for you and your farm, but looking at things maybe in a little bit different light and how one benefit could have a potential, not downfall, that is a wrong word, but one benefit can have a lot of
Amber.
but one benefit can have a lot of great potential for other areas on the farm that can benefit as well. So I have to say that I appreciate your time here today, Ben, because you've got a really great product here from the sounds of it, and it's going to have a lot of potential for other producers to be able to implement and utilize something that can not only help them and their farm, but the environment and their community as well. So thank you so much for your time here this afternoon, Ben.
I appreciate everybody's time, and if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out. I, of course, would love to answer any questions that you guys come up with.
That sounds wonderful. And a quick thank you to those who asked your questions and typed those in. We always appreciate it, but also to those who listen after the fact. We appreciate you as well. And as always, we have a lot of great and number of programs and areas you can get involved with professional dairy producers. And you can head over to our website at pdpw.org to learn more. But for now, thank you for joining us here today, and we'll see you here tomorrow on the Dairy Signal. Bye now.